Hi, and welcome to the Special Olympics Illinois webcast tutorials, our GMS 6 Spring Game Series. Today we're going to be discussing defining your events. Now, when we go through our webcasts, what we're going to do is we're going to split them up a little differently. This webcast will talk about our track events. We'll do a separate one for field since there are some different options. As well as we'll do a separate one for our young athlete events since there are some specifics we need to put in regarding those. But for today's session, we're going to talk about our standard track events. There are some things that you'll need before we get started. You'll want to have a copy of your policies and procedures just to reference in regards to age groups and different things like that. As well as you'll want to know the number of lanes on your track at your facility before we get started. Okay, so now we're into our GMS, and we see here that we've got our spring games here. As a review from our last session of setting up our games, I just created this as a test so that I wouldn't get this confused with my games. And now we're ready. We've got them set up. We're ready to go in and start defining our events. So we're just going to click on our games. And if we click on delegations, it's going to show all the delegations that we put into the games. It will show that they're empty because we haven't added anybody yet. But then if we click on our events, if we only have track and field at our spring games, we'll just see track and field. But for those that may have soccer at your spring games, you should also have a separate sport here for soccer. But since we're just handling track and field, we're going to click on our little plus sign, and now we'll be able to scroll through and see all of the events that we've put into these games. For this session, we're going to talk just about our standard track events, since they are pretty much set up identically. So we're going to use our 100-meter run as our example for today. So if I right-click on 100-meter run, I'm going to come down here to Setup, and then click Define this event. And now it's going to open our event definitions. We'll see here our event name is 100-meter run. Our sport is track and field. And then there's an event code. These event codes are unique to this event. Some people will use this in the registration wizard, which might be a little easier than clicking and selecting the drop downs to select your events. But that's what the event code is used for. Our 100-meter run is an individual event, so we'll leave that. And our event features. Here's where we can put in here that yes, we'd like to capitalize our division names. We are going to use lanes. If for some reason you had a different level or a different grouping, you could choose one of these. But typically with track and field, we're just using lanes. So then we can click out of there. And GMS 6 defaults with a number of rounds being 2. We want to make sure that this is 1 round. If it is 2, what it will do when you're divisioning is it will try to do a preliminary division as opposed to your final division. So we'll check to make sure that that is 1 round. Our awards are medals, first through third, ribbons for all others. And we want to change this place assignment rule to don't skip places on ties. And here lists our age groups. If we click here on these 3 little dots, it'll open up our editing window. So we have the generic age groups set up in here. But since we do add a 50 and up age group this year, we're going to go ahead and click Add. And then we can just type 50. And click OK, and now it'll see it created a 30 to 49 and a 50 and up. I like to start all of my events defined with all of the age groups. That way when I run my first round of divisioning, I can see what happens using all the age groups. And then if I need to combine, I'll come back here and combine some of these at that point. But let's make sure that we've just got all of our age groups in, and once we do, we can click Save. Again, our lovely addition to 6, we'll say, is the fact that our date for calculating ages does not translate all the way through to our events. So we do need to make sure that we set this to be December 31st, and since it's 2014, we'll leave it there. This is something also to be aware of. Every time you come in and check anything in your event definitions, this will open up and it will be blank. You'll need to come in here and always set this date for calculating ages. Once I save this and close out of it, it will keep that information in, but if I reopen to redefine, I need to reset that to be December 31st. I like to just make it a rule of thumb that as soon as I open an event and look at their event definitions, that this is the first thing that I do so that I don't forget about it. Our scoreboard name, if we were linking to an external scoreboard, we could have that there, but since we don't do that, we can get rid of that. That tends to show up sometimes in front of divisions on reports, and we don't need that to be there. Here in our score setup, our score type is time, and we're going to call it our final score. And we're going to use 2 decimal points on our values. If for some reason qualifying scores were not required, then we could select here and it would not make us put a qualifying score in the wizard, but since they are required, we'll leave that blank. And then we're going to set our honest effort default to be our 30%. Since we'll division at 20, we want our honest effort to point out anything above 30%. And then here in our scheduling, we can leave this how this defaults. This will automatically transition our status from finished unofficial to finished official. That's more when this is relating to an external scoreboard or if this were live on a website. But we can just leave that as is. Our schedule entrance, we do want this to be selected to be each division and all entrants in that division get the same schedule. That's how we want to do it. And then down here we've got our, let's see if I can open this up a little bit. There we go. All of our genders and all of our roles are allowed. These 2 options down here, if you did have another sport, say you were offering soccer, you could select here so that if they were entered in track and field and you tried to enter them into a soccer event, it would not let you. As well as you could also say here, since this is 100-meter run, we could select that they cannot be a 100-meter walk. And we could also go through and select any of the walk races. This is a good tool if you have volunteers that may not be aware of those restrictions. Also, if you have coaches that may not be aware of those restrictions, it'll help point that out when you or a volunteer are going through and putting in your entries. It won't let you put them into those conflicting events. I like to set this up if I have all volunteers inputting, but if I'm going to be doing the majority of it, I really don't honestly bother with this. It gets a little tedious and isn't all that necessary. So that's setting up this event. We're just going to go click here and click Save. And now we've set up our 100-meter run. And then you're going to go and repeat all of those steps for all of our standard track events. And we'll come back to talk about our field events and young athletes events in another session. And also as a reminder, there are some reference materials available on the GMS 6 users forum. We'll put up a checklist of all the event definitions so that you can download that and check to make sure that all of your settings are set up the way you need them. Thanks, and that concludes our setting up our track events. I hope you found this helpful, and I will see you again in our next session.